They say the air's thinner at altitude, but in my experience, it's not the mountains that make it hard to breathe, it's corporate hypocrisy. My name's Miles Rourke, and until 3 months ago, I was the lead systems engineer at Green Core Technologies, a mid-sized energy optimization firm based in Denver. We claim to be revolutionizing how renewable grids integrate with smart homes. What we were really doing, duct taping legacy code onto greenwashed marketing slides. But I believed in the mission, at least at first. I joined the company in 2018, fresh off my master's in computer engineering. Denver felt alive then. Wind turbines on the horizon, solar initiatives launching statewide. The idea of working on clean tech didn't just sound good on paper, it felt like purpose. Back then, the company was led by a guy named Harold Becker. Old school, but in a good way. He remembered birthdays. Let you build without layers of red tape. He told me in my second week, "You'll outgrow this role in 2 years. I hope we grow fast enough to keep up with you." I never forgot that. But 6 months later, Harold retired, sold his shares to a VC-backed board. And with that came our new CEO, Tanner Blythe. You know the type, former founder turned serial operator. He talked more about agility and vertical alignment than energy itself. Within a year, the cafeteria served cold brew. The engineers wore noise-canceling headphones like armor, and the HR slide decks had words like resilience quotient. Tanner also brought in his people, namely Vince, a VP of engineering from his previous failed crypto startup, and a rotating cast of product managers who didn't know what a power inverter was. What they did know, apparently, was how to cut costs. Which brings me to my first raise request. It was the end of 2020. I had led the redesign of our load balancing algorithm. That upgrade alone saved one of our commercial clients over $300K in energy mismanagement fines. My direct manager told me, "This is incredible work, Miles. Seriously game-changing." I waited for the follow-up. It never came. So I scheduled a meeting with HR, came prepared with metrics, peer endorsements, and market salary data. Tanner took the meeting himself, said, "Let's revisit this next quarter. Right now, we're tightening budgets to maintain runway." Next quarter turned into next year, and next year turned into 4. 4 years of no budget flexibility. Team wins, not individual incentives. "You're too critical to shift right now. We need your stability." That last one was my favorite. I was so valuable, they couldn't afford to reward me. In January of this year, something shifted. We had a team-wide Slack outage, and during the downtime, someone shared a screenshot of our engineering.org chart from 2019. There I was in of 4 original team leads. Now, I was the last one left. Everyone else had either quit or been quietly replaced. I began to understand. Staying wasn't loyalty. It was stagnation, disguised as reliability. So I updated my resume. Quietly, after hours, with no LinkedIn posts, just curiosity. I interviewed with Soldina, clean energy startup based in Boulder. Younger, leaner, and more technical than Green Core had ever been. Their founder, Ava Chen, was a former Tesla engineer who left after growing disillusioned with scale without soul. We hit it off immediately. She said, "I'm not looking for rock stars, I'm looking for builders." I smiled. That I could do. 2 weeks later, I received an offer from Soldin. 25% base salary increase. Equity. A real product roadmap I could influence. And the one thing I hadn't expected, we'd want you to lead our grid software team, not just code guide the vision. I accepted. And then came the part I'd been dreading. My resignation meeting with Tanner. He didn't blink when I handed him the letter. Just stared at it like it had personally insulted him. "You're walking out after all we've invested in you. I've been asking for support for 4 years. You invested in keeping me quiet." That was the moment his mask slipped. "This is backstabbing, Miles." "No," I said calmly. "This is surviving." He revoked my system access that afternoon. Escorted me out with a half-empty laptop bag and a final HR form. Just like that, I was gone. 4 years of architecture. 4 years of midnight bug fixes. 4 years of loyalty. Wiped clean. But here's the part that stayed with me. As I was walking out, Vincith, the VP, who once told me to stop over-engineering edge cases, glanced up from his desk and muttered, "Should have seen this coming." He didn't mean me quitting. He meant the fallout that was about to begin. Soldin's headquarters was tucked into the foothills west of Boulder. All glass walls, solar shingles, and concrete floors warmed by geothermal coils. But more than the sleek building or the eco-efficiency, what struck me on day one was this. People looked happy to be here. Not perk happy, not ping pong table happy, but purpose-driven. I met my new team in a sunlit war room with handwritten whiteboard grids stretching from floor to ceiling. Ava introduced me casually, like I was another part of the machine, not a savior, not a prodigy. That felt right. The team was small, but tight. Mira, lead backend dev, had migrated from a smart irrigation startup. Ravi, a recent MIT grad with more curiosity than ego. Oscar, a crusty but brilliant systems engineer who once ran power simulations for FEMA. We had 90 days to build an adaptive load scheduling engine that could learn user habits in real time and prevent overloads across residential grids. I was finally in a place that understood what I'd been trying to do for years. But freedom came with friction. In my second week, I challenged one of Oscar's optimization assumptions in a team sync. I expected pushback. Instead, he leaned back, stroked his beard, and said, "That's a fair point, let's whiteboard it." At Greencore, that would have been met with a Slack DM hours later about tone and respecting seniority. Here, debate was culture. That was the moment I stopped second-guessing myself. Still, there were ghosts. One night, around 9 p.m., I stayed late tweaking the decision tree for a variable frequency drive module. I needed to reference some of my old notes from Greencore, nothing proprietary, just logic flows I'd scribbled during late-night test cycles. Out of muscle memory, I opened my old Google Drive. Access denied. I stared at the screen. They hadn't just cut me out. They'd wiped the shared folders I created, renamed the core repos I built, and reassigned my code comments to Team Lead Archive. They were trying to erase me. It wasn't petty. It was deliberate. That weekend, I went hiking alone in El Dorado Canyon. I needed distance from code, from ego, from everything. At the summit, I sat on a boulder and did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out a sketch pad. Not Figma, not Lucid Chart, just a pencil and paper. I sketched what Soldin could become, just the software. But the systems, the values, the rituals, the integrity underneath the tech. A culture that didn't punish feedback. A team that shared credit. A roadmap built around people, not just products. It hit me all at once. I wasn't rebuilding my career. I was rebuilding the thing I'd hoped Greencore would be. Back in the office Monday morning, Ava stopped by my desk holding a ceramic mug that said, "Think, talk." "You've been quiet," she said. Trying not to overimpose. I know I come with baggage. She raised an eyebrow. "Your experience isn't baggage. It's architecture. Just make sure you're building with us, not on your own island." Fair. I pitched my load balancing improvements to the team that afternoon. Instead of treating it like a personal crusade, I invited critique. Integrated feedback. Focused on clarity. And it worked. 3 weeks later, our pilot went live in a suburban grid outside of Fort Collins. Efficiency improved by 31%. Customer service calls dropped by half. No outages. Clients started noticing. "You guys did this in 6 weeks?" one partner said. "Greencore couldn't stabilize in 6 months. That name again. I didn't respond. Just nodded and pulled up the dashboard metrics. Meanwhile, LinkedIn kept pinging. I didn't post about my new job, but word got around. Some messages were congratulatory. Some were curious. But one was from Vince. Saw Saldin's release. "Nice work. Would love to catch up sometime." I stared at it for a full minute before closing the tab. The same guy who once told me I was too deep in the weeds to see product direction now wanted to reconnect. Not because he respected me. Because he needed a bridge he once helped burn. I didn't reply. A few days later, Ava pulled me aside after a partner review meeting. Soldin's getting attention. Not just from customers, investors, acquirers, even competitors. I nodded. "Let me guess. Greencore?" She smirked. "You're good." They hadn't contacted us directly, but one of our newer partners forwarded an email they'd received. "We'd like to understand your relationship with Soldin, particularly around adaptive grid solutions. We're exploring strategic partnerships and want to ensure we're aligned long-term." Strategic partnerships. Translation. They wanted to know how we were winning and if they could buy, copy, or block it. Ava was calm. "I'm not worried," she said. "They're looking backward. We're already 2 versions ahead." That night, I stood in front of a whiteboard mapping our next sprint. Oscar walked in and pointed at my mock-up. "That's not how most grid systems handle redundancy." "Yeah," I said. "That's the point." He grinned. "Then let's make it better." I was no longer surviving. I was leading. In a room full of people who wanted to build, not posture. In a company that didn't ask for sacrifice without recognition. And most of all, in a place where no one had to ask permission to matter. End of Chapter 2. Approximately 5,000 characters. Would you like to continue with Chapter 3, where Soldin receives an unexpected challenge and Miles is forced to confront a surprising offer from the very company that pushed him out? Bạn đã nói. Chương 3. ChatGPT đã nói. Results generated by this GPT are limited by ChatGPT and text-based, but you can design logos, brand kits, and other branding creatives using visme.co, or you can hire a professional designer. Also, you can join GPT School to automate your business, productivity, and personal tasks using AI. Chapter 3. A familiar knock. Approximately 5,000 characters. It was a Tuesday morning when everything shifted. Our team was knee-deep in sprint planning, arguing about edge case load priorities and multi-resident setups, when Ava entered the room with an expression I hadn't seen before measured. Careful, but focused. Miles, can I talk to you? Heads turned. Even Oscar paused mid-sentence. We stepped into a side conference room. Ava closed the door softly and slid her tablet across the table. A message was open on screen. Subject: Strategic Discussion Opportunity. Green Core Technologies. From Tanner Blythe. To Ava Chen, CEO, Soldin Energy. My stomach tightened. He reached out to me directly, Ava said. Requested a private call. Said Green Core's board is exploring partnerships and wants to discuss a visionary collaboration. I scanned the message. It was corporate smoothness on top, desperation underneath. The final line read, "We've observed Soldin's progress and would love to explore potential synergies, especially in grid efficiency systems." I looked up. They're fishing, and not subtly. Ava nodded. We don't owe them anything, but I wanted to be transparent. I'm taking a quick call with him tomorrow. I want you on it. He blinked. You want me on the call with Tanner? I do. That might be combustible. I know. But I also know you're the one person who sees right through him. She paused. Besides, you earned that seat at the table. The next day, 9 a.m., I was back face to face with the ghost I thought I'd buried. Tanner appeared on the screen, polished as ever. AirPods in, framed credentials behind him, and that same artificial calm that once camouflaged his condescension. Ava, Miles, so glad we could connect. I gave him a curt nod. Tanner. He didn't flinch, but he noticed. His smile sharpened slightly. He launched into his pitch. Green Core is in a phase of realignment. We've seen Soldin's traction, particularly in suburban load prediction. Really impressive. We think there's a world where we don't compete, we collaborate. I continued. We could offer infrastructure support, existing client access, even co-branding. The market is consolidating. Fast alliances are critical. I watched Ava remain unreadable. Then he added, and of course, it would be ideal to align our technical leadership. Miles, your fingerprints are all over this movement. It would be poetic to bring it full circle. There it was. The real play. You mean the codebase I wasn't allowed to update, the roadmap I was locked out of, and the feedback I gave that was labeled resistance to team dynamics? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Tanner laughed, small and dismissive. Look, we all had blind spots. The industry's changed. We're looking forward now. I glanced at Ava. She gave me a nod. You're not looking forward, I said. You're looking backward and trying to buy what you missed. We're not a patch for your culture failures. We're the proof that values win. Silence. Thanks for the offer, but no. After the call, Ava sat back and smiled. That felt final. Because it was, I said. I expected to feel triumph. Instead, I felt release. That afternoon, Ravi walked into my office. Hey, just saw on Green Tech Pulse Green Core laid off 20% of their product team. Already? Apparently funding didn't close. I didn't say anything. He did. I'm glad you came here, Miles. We all are. A week later, Soldin was invited to present at the National Smart Grid Alliance Summit. Our team was asked to speak on adaptive grid forecasting for decentralized communities. A year ago, I couldn't even get approval to attend a webinar. Now, I was building the future I once begged to be part of. At the summit, after our presentation, a man in his mid-50s approached me. Gray blazer, glasses, kind eyes. You're Miles Rourke, right? Yes. I'm Dave Ornelas. I used to be the CTO at Green Core. Left when the board forced Harold out. My breath caught. I remember your name. I've been following your work. Just wanted to say what you're doing now. It's what we dreamed of back then. He shook my hand firmly. Thank you for proving we weren't crazy. That night, I walked out onto my hotel balcony. The Denver skyline glittered in the cool air. I thought about the years I gave to a system that didn't see me, how I left quietly, how they tried to erase me, and how none of it stopped what came next. They tried to keep me small. All they did was push me into a bigger story. The buzz from the summit hadn't faded when it hit us. Solden was growing faster than we could track. The phone calls doubled, then tripled. Cities wanted pilot programs. VCs wanted meetings. Journalists wanted quotes. The small Boulder startup that once flew under the radar was now headline material. And while we were excited, we were also stretched. We weren't built for scale yet. What we had was vision, cohesion, and grit. What we lacked was infrastructure. Ava called an emergency leadership sync. We sat around the same whiteboard table that had felt so roomy a month ago. Now it felt crowded. We're getting offers we didn't ask for, she said, which is a signal, but it's also a trap if we don't stay focused. I nodded, but I could feel the undercurrent of pressure rising in the room. Mira spoke up. We need more devs. We're close to burnout. Oscar added, and QA. We're finding edge case bugs too late in the cycle. Ava looked at me. Miles, what do we lose if we scale too fast? It was a question I'd been thinking about for days. We lose the culture that made us agile in the first place. We start managing people instead of growing with them. We forget what made our work human. Then how do we scale without losing it? I took a breath. We build mentorship before management. We document not because we have to, but so new voices can catch up. And we bake in feedback loops before we hire another dozen engineers. Ava smiled. Build slow to move fast. Got it. Over the next 4 weeks, we onboarded 5 new engineers. Each was paired with a founding peer from our original team. Not as a boss. As a builder, we created a Why This Works document for every major module in our codebase. Not just the how, but the why. So people didn't just follow process. They understood purpose. And something amazing happened. The new folks weren't just productive. They were engaged. One junior dev, Lily, pointed out a fault in our battery side logic that none of us had caught. She hesitated before flagging it. I made sure to respond publicly in our Slack. This is exactly why we grow like this. Your insight improves our system and makes all of us better. It wasn't just for her. It was for everyone watching. But not everything was easy. Success had made us visible. And visibility brings scrutiny. A prominent tech journalist published a piece titled, Can Solden Keep Its Soul as It Scales? It was meant to be thought-provoking, but it stirred up doubt too. Investors began asking about our runway. Clients began asking about redundancy. And some employees began asking, will we still belong here once we're big? That's when Ava pulled me aside. They trust you, she said, not just as an engineer, but as a symbol of what this company is supposed to stand for. I don't want to be a symbol. You already are. That Friday, I stood in front of our now 40-person company during our weekly town hall. Growth is not the enemy, I said, but unintentional growth is. We didn't build Solden to be the biggest. We built it to be the most thoughtful, the most resilient, the most human. So as we grow, ask more questions, speak up more. Don't protect your corner, protect our compass. Silence, then nods. Then, unexpectedly, applause. It wasn't loud, but it was committed. That night, I got a text from Ava. Thanks for anchoring us. I responded. Thanks for building something worth anchoring. Meanwhile, the ghost of Green Core was crumbling. The layoffs grew deeper. Tanner was no longer CEO step down, according to their PR. Word had it that their board was shopping the company for acquisition, and a recruiter forwarded me a message they'd received from Vince. He was looking for a new role, preferably somewhere mission, aligned with a strong engineering culture. I didn't laugh, didn't gloat. I just turned back to the dashboard on my screen. Solden's uptime, 99.997%. Our last outage, 72 days ago. Customer feedback, 4,8. We weren't perfect, but we were steady, and we were real. And for the first time in my entire career, I felt this truth in my bones. We weren't just reacting to a broken system anymore. We were replacing it. It was a cold January morning when the email landed in Ava's inbox. Subject line, confidential, partnership proposal from Gridspan Technologies. I was in the middle of reviewing our simulation stress results when she forwarded it to me with a single line. We need to talk. Gridspan was no ordinary company. A Fortune 200 energy conglomerate, they owned grid infrastructure across 17 states. Their CEO had once testified before Congress. Their R&D lab had a budget 10 times our total revenue. And now, they wanted to partner with us. We booked a call for the following Tuesday. In the days leading up to it, we ran scenario after scenario. What if this was a buyout attempt in disguise? What if they wanted to white label our software and push us into a service role? What if we said no and they just rebuilt our tools with their own army of engineers? Oscar was skeptical. Big fish don't swim toward you unless they smell blood or opportunity. Ravi was starstruck. This could take us global. Mira, always level-headed, said, "It depends on the terms and the trust." The call was surprisingly respectful. Gridspan's CTO, Dr. Ana Delgado, opened the conversation. "We've been following Soldin's progress. Your adaptive load forecasting is ahead of anything we've built internally." She wasn't bluffing. She quoted details from our recent pilot in Spokane that hadn't even been published publicly. "We don't want to acquire you. We want to amplify you. Co-develop a national framework with your engine at its core." My mind raced. That would mean our software could shape how millions of homes interact with the grid. Real impact. Real exposure. Real risk. Ava stayed cool. "We appreciate the offer. What's your ideal structure?" Anna answered without flinching. "Joint IP ownership. Shared branding. Deployment support from our network. Profit split. 60/40ths your favor." I raised an eyebrow. That was generous. Too generous? Anna caught it. "We've built infrastructure, but not trust. You have what we don't, credibility." After the call, our leadership team sat in silence for a moment. Then Oscar spoke. "They want our soul. Nicely. With contracts and smiles." "They want reach," Mara corrected. "We still hold the soul." Ava turned to me. "You've seen what happens when small teams get swallowed. Do we risk it?" He hesitated. "We risk more by saying yes, without knowing who we'll become. But we risk even more if we say no and try to stay small just to feel safe." She nodded. "So what do we do?" I stared out the window for a long moment. Then I said, "We do what we've always done. Build the thing we wish existed. But this time, we make the rules." The next 2 weeks were a blur of negotiations. We brought in a legal team, crafted clauses for cultural preservation, and included a reverse exit clause. If Gridspan ever compromised our product vision, we could pull out without penalty. Anna didn't blink. "If your mission fails, the tech doesn't matter anyway." Respect. Word began to leak. TechCrunch ran a teaser headline. "Small fish, big grid. Is Soldin the key to a smarter nation?" Some called us lucky. Some said we were being naive to partner with a corporate giant. But we didn't care. We weren't selling out. We were scaling upon our terms. 2 months later, we launched Project Helix, our joint grid modernization initiative with Gridspan. The rollout began in 3 counties across Colorado. By week 3, household outage rates had dropped by 38%. Peak time load costs had decreased by 19%. Customer satisfaction, Fia Comunistas. News outlets ran stories titled, "The Startup That Fixed What Billion-Dollar Utilities Couldn't." But it wasn't the headlines that got to me. It was the email from a retired electrical engineer in Greeley. "For 40 years, I worked to improve how we distribute energy in this country. I retired thinking it'd never happen. You proved me wrong. Thank you." I read it 3 times, then pinned it to the wall next to my monitor. That Friday, I walked into our expanded office, and now twice the size, with a familiar cardboard box. Theo, our new hire, raised an eyebrow. "You quitting already?" I laughed. "Nah, just moving my desk closer to the team. Don't want to forget where this started." He grinned. "Where it started, or what it stood for?" "Both. Always both. Success, I'd learned, has a rhythm until it doesn't." It had been just over 3 months since the launch of Project Helix. Soldin had tripled its footprint. Our joint systems with Gridspan were being considered for statewide expansion in Oregon and Arizona, and I had spoken on 2 national panels about sustainable grid resilience. Then came the breach. It happened overnight. A silent exploit in our legacy telemetry module, ironically, one of the few pieces we'd retained from early Green Corps prototypes. A cascade of false positive data triggered emergency shutdowns across 4 counties in Utah. The grid didn't collapse, but it shook. Customers lost power for hours. Municipalities demanded answers. And inside Soldin, the pressure went from high to suffocating. Our war room lit up like a command center. Everyone dropped what they were doing. Mira coordinated hotfixes. Ravi traced the telemetry worm backward. Oscar, who hadn't missed a day in 2 years, was already halfway through a module rewrite before Ava finished saying code freeze. By 6 a.m., we had containment. By 8 o'clock, partial restoration. By 10:30, a full patch. But the damage had been done. Headlines were not kind. Has Soldin scaled too fast? Green disrupted. Energy startup systems cause grid confusion. From hero to vulnerability. Gridspan's legal counsel reached out immediately. Their message was professional, but unmistakable in tone. This incident raises concerns about stability, oversight, and the risk profile of emerging technologies. We're placing Phase 2 of the rollout under review, pending further evaluation. Translation. We're pulling the brakes until we decide if you're worth keeping. That night, Ava called a full-hands meeting. It wasn't mandatory, but everyone came. The team looked tired, not just physically but emotionally. You could see the questions behind every eye. Were we out of our depth? Was this the moment it all fell apart? Ava stood at the front, calm as ever. Mistakes test a product. Pressure tests a company. But only values can rebuild trust. She paused. So let's rebuild. Then she looked at me. And suddenly, it wasn't just her talking. It was my turn. I stepped forward. 4 years ago, I worked at a company that punished risk and ignored warnings, where speaking up was seen as disloyal, where failure was buried instead of learned from. We are not that company. I let the words settle. We build differently. We build with accountability. That doesn't mean perfection, it means courage, to admit when we fall short, and strength to respond the right way. You want to know if we're ready for what's next? We just proved it. The silence broke, and the room clapped, not loud, not performative, but real. The next week was a blur of recovery. We published a full post-mortem, transparent, detailed, and signed by the entire engineering team. We created a cross-company incident review with Gridspan's security division. Ava went on record with national energy publications, answering hard questions instead of spinning soft excuses. And something shifted. Instead of losing trust, we gained it. A Gridspan executive told me privately, "This was the most professional crisis response we've seen in 5 years. Most companies obfuscate. You opened the door and invited accountability in." They reinstated Phase 2. Weeks later, I got a handwritten letter. It was from a city engineer in Ogden, Utah, of the areas affected by the outage. "You fixed in 12 hours what used to take 5 days. I've been in this business 22 years, and I've never seen a response like that. Keep going." I pinned it beside the thank you note from the retired electrical engineer. The wall was growing. In March, I sat alone in our new Denver satellite office, once a WeWork suite, now Soldin's data systems lab. The sun angled through the tall windows. The city buzzed far below. I opened my notebook, the same one I used to sketch ideas when I was just trying to survive. I flipped to the first page. Build the company I wanted to work for, not the one I had to escape. I smiled, because somehow, we had. Green Core? They were acquired 2 months later, folded into a logistics conglomerate that had no interest in clean tech. Tanner took a sabbatical in Bali, according to LinkedIn. Vince became a fractional advisor. I wished them nothing. Not spite, not luck, just nothing. Because that part of the story was over. What mattered now was the people around me, the team that stayed up all night to fix the breach, the interns who weren't afraid to challenge decisions, the clients who believed we were more than a feature, they saw us as a future. And me? I finally understood something my father once told me, years before he passed. You don't know who you are until everything goes wrong, and you still show up anyway. That had become Soldin's heartbeat. Not success, but resilience.